All I asked for was one night to rest, to breathe, to let someone else hold the weight for a while. The snow had started just after lunch, flurries at first, then heavier flakes softening the streetlights and turning Maple Hill into something out of a Christmas card. Inside my apartment, it was the usual chaos: crumpled socks under the table, sticky fingers on the cabinet handles, Ellie humming to herself as she lined up toy blocks on the windowsill, and Jonah chasing a deflated balloon from the birthday party 3 weeks ago. The heater ticked gently. My phone buzzed twice: calendar reminders, pre-op check, pack overnight bag, text mom. I sat on the floor, folding pajamas into two small backpacks, pausing to count juice boxes and wondering, again, if this was a mistake. But I didn't have options. I'd called every backup I could think of. Friends were out of town or home with visiting in-laws. My neighbor, Trina, offered to check in if it's really serious, which wasn't quite the reassurance I needed for abdominal surgery. So I asked my parents. They said yes too quickly. My mother's text, "Of course, Diana, enjoy your quiet evening." It read like a formality, not reassurance. Still, I chose to believe it. Maybe this would be the start of something better. By 5 p.m., the twins were dressed in their fleece onesies, already tired from the earlier excitement of packing their favorite books and 3 varieties of fruit snacks. Ellie wore her mismatched gloves with pride. Jonah insisted on bringing the bunny that was now more thread than fur. I loaded them into the back seat, kissed the top of their heads, and drove toward my childhood neighborhood, Mountain Laurel Drive. My parents' house looked the same, overdecorated for Christmas, every eave lined with blinking lights, a wreath on every window. Beverly opened the door wearing a velvet shawl and cranberry lipstick. "Oh, look at them," she cooed, taking Ellie by the hand. "Still so small." "Thanks again," I said, lifting Jonah up the steps. "Their schedule's in the front pocket, meds in the side zipper, and they usually fall asleep around 8. We know how to handle children, Diana," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just go rest." Frank appeared behind her, nodding briefly. "You look tired." I hesitated, then bent down and kissed the twins. "Be good, okay? Mama loves you." "We love you!" Jonah shouted, already distracted by the animated snowman on the TV. Beverly ushered them inside and closed the door before I could change my mind. The drive home felt longer than usual. I played one of Caleb's old jazz playlists, mostly piano and trumpet, the kind that sounded better when you were alone. The apartment greeted me with stillness. I placed my phone face down, poured a cup of cinnamon tea, and sat on the couch with my legs folded under me, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop. The page was still blank. I was supposed to write something tonight, something that had nothing to do with invoices, diapers, or meal prep. But my mind felt hollow. I wandered over to the kitchen, opened the drawer with Caleb's old scarves, and pulled out the one with the frayed edges. Still smelled faintly like peppermint. He used to tuck candies into the pockets during December, and the twins would hunt for them like squirrels. The phone rang. Nurse Nell. "Just confirming you're fasting tonight. No food after 9. Clear liquids only. Bring ID, insurance, and someone to drive you home." "Got it," I replied, voice low. "Thanks, Nell." "Try to sleep early," she added. "You'll be okay." After we hung up, I reheated the soup, but didn't touch it. My appetite had wandered off weeks ago. I stood by the window, watching the snow fall, and thought about how fast things change. One moment, you're part of a family. Next, you're asking to borrow space in theirs, hoping they still see you as someone worth caring for. I lay in bed, scrolling through old messages from Caleb. His last one before the surgery said, "You're allowed to ask for help. Just once, Diana. Trust someone." That was the hard part, trusting anyone after losing everything. I must have dozed off because the room was dark when I heard the buzz again. My phone screen glowed beside me. 11:32 p.m., a new message, unknown number. "Are these your kids? Found them crying outside. Grayson, across the street from your folks." I hadn't driven that fast since labor, except this time the pain was coming from somewhere deeper. The streets blurred beneath my tires, wet from the snow, streaked with the yellow of blinking caution lights. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly they ached. I turned onto Mountain Laurel Drive, and the Christmas lights on my parents' lawn blinked garishly in the distance, still celebrating like nothing had gone wrong. When I pulled up in front of the house across the street, I saw him, Mr. Grayson. The porch light above his door glowed warm against the snow, and the man himself stood on the steps, wrapped in a flannel-lined coat, holding Jonah in one arm, while Ellie clung to his side. A wool blanket was draped over their shoulders. I barely parked before I ran. Jonah's face was streaked with dried tears, his little nose red from the cold. Ellie looked stunned, clutching her bunny like a lifeline. They were outside, Mr. Grayson said quietly as I gathered them into my arms. Crying near the back gate. I think they tried to knock. I looked past him across the street. Music spilled from the open windows of my parents' house, muffled laughter, something clicking like glass. My jaw locked. I knocked, he said again. No one answered. I didn't want to leave them out there. Thank you, I managed, my voice hoarse. Thank you for bringing them in. He didn't say much else, just nodded, then reached behind him and brought out 2 small mugs. Warm milk, he offered. Little bit of cinnamon, hope that's okay. The twins sipped quietly, huddled against my legs. Inside the house, I felt something splinter. Shame, rage. I couldn't name it, just that it had weight. Grayson, I said, you didn't have to. He shook his head, cutting me off gently. I was a mailman for 33 years, ma'am. Rain, snow, or squirrels. You see a lot on these porches. This wasn't the first night I wondered what was really happening behind those blinking lights. I held my kids tighter. The snow had started again, light and steady. He stepped back inside for a moment and returned with a folded notepad. Name of someone who might help, he said, handing it to me. Lady down the street. Used to work with early childhood support services. Quiet type. Doesn't ask much. Name's Eloise. I took the paper, stared at the name. I had no idea what to do with it. If you ever need someone, he added, she shows up. Back at my apartment, I laid the twins down on the couch, still wrapped in Grayson's blanket. Ellie fell asleep almost instantly. Jonah clung to my wrist. You came back, he mumbled. I'll always come back, I whispered. I stood in the kitchen while the tea kettle boiled. I didn't call my parents. I wanted to scream, to demand, how could you? But I already knew the answer. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. Instead, I opened the banking app. The screen loaded slowly. I scrolled down to the monthly transfer I'd set up last spring when they said they'd need help temporarily to manage the mortgage. I canceled it. Then I opened my messages. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before typing just 2 words. Not anymore. I deleted them. The twins stirred behind me. The room smelled like cinnamon and fatigue. I thought of Caleb, his voice calm even when I wasn't. I scrolled to one of the old voicemails. You're stronger than you think. But even strong people need someone. I took a deep breath and reached for the notepad. The contact info for Eloise Carter was written in tidy block letters, followed by a local number. I stared at it until my fingers moved on their own. I opened a new message and typed, Nurse Nell gave me your name. Surgery's at 7. I don't know if I'll make it back the same. She didn't knock like a savior. She just stepped in like someone who knew where the light switch was. The hallway light flickered once before settling. It was still barely dawn. The sky outside tinted that blue-gray of winter mornings when the sun hesitates to show up. I hadn't slept, not really. Just drifted in and out, listening to the radiator hiss and the twins breathe, making sure they were still next to me. When the knock came, soft, measured, I didn't jump. I'd been expecting it since I sent the text. I opened the door without checking the peephole. Eloise Carter stood there in a faded green sweater, sleeves pushed to her elbows. Her coat was thin but clean. A canvas bag hung over her shoulder, and her boots bore the scuff marks of someone who walked more than she talked. Diana, she asked, voice low. I nodded. She stepped inside as if she'd done it before, not just into my apartment, but into moments like this. Moments when someone didn't need a cape, just a chair to sit in and hands that knew what to do. Ellie peeked out from under the blanket. Jonah sat up, hair a nest of confusion. Eloise crouched slowly, eye level. Good morning, she said softly. You must be the brave ones. Neither child spoke, but Ellie blinked and didn't look away. Jonah offered a stuffed bunny as if to test her worth. She smiled, took it carefully, and inspected the missing eye with dramatic seriousness. Looks like this little one's seen a lot of love, she said. Jonah giggled. While they settled, I found myself hovering, trying to explain things that didn't need explaining. I left the oatmeal on the counter, and their vitamins are in the cabinet. Jonah doesn't like the blue bowl unless he's tired, then it's the only one he wants. Ellie won't nap if there's music playing. Eloise looked up. Got it. I hesitated. You probably think I don't think anything, she said gently but firmly. I just showed up. Nurse Nell called around 6:30 to remind me that pre-op would begin at 7. My voice trembled as I answered, though I tried to keep it steady. When I hung up, I found the twins curled around Eloise's legs, watching a cartoon she'd queued up without the sound. She sat on the floor like it was the natural order of things, legs crossed, the canvas bag now open beside her. Out came two well-loved books, a puzzle missing one corner, and a miniature drawing pad with dog-eared pages. Everything looked soft, used, and carefully chosen. As I gathered my things, I caught her reading The Velveteen Rabbit. Her voice was low, almost rhythmic. Jonah leaned his head against her arm. Ellie watched the pages like they were spells. I sat on the edge of the couch and listened to a few lines. It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. It takes a long time. I swallowed hard. I should go, I whispered. Eloise looked up. They'll be okay. I nodded. Thank you. I don't even know you. She stood slowly. You know enough. That I'm here. At the door, I paused. I wasn't sure what I wanted to ask. Maybe everything. Maybe nothing. The hallway light buzzed faintly. My scarf slipped from my shoulder, and she reached to hand it back, an old thing of Caleb's, still smelling like wintergreen and dryer sheets. You don't know me, I said again. Why are you doing this? She looked at me for a long moment. Because once someone helped me without asking why. As the elevator doors closed, I whispered, Who was it? I woke up to soft humming and the scent of warm oatmeal, sounds and smells I hadn't associated with safety in a long time. The world was slow to come back into focus. Blinds filtered sunlight into wide golden stripes across the foot of the bed. The white noise of machines and the hushed tones from the hallway melted together like a distant lullaby. My mouth was dry, my limbs heavy, but the pain was dull, manageable. It was the kind of ache that reminded you something had been fixed. I turned my head slightly and saw them, Jonah curled at the end of a wide recliner, his socks mismatched, Ellie resting with her cheek pressed against a pale lavender blanket I didn't recognize. Eloise sat beneath them both, her back straight but relaxed, one hand resting lightly on Ellie's shoulder. She looked up and smiled when our eyes met. They slept through most of the morning, she said gently. We've been coloring, reading. Jonah told me you're a lion. My throat was too raw to respond with anything but a half smile. I nodded. Nurse Nell appeared at the door with her tablet in hand and the scent of fresh coffee following her. Vitals look great, she said, placing a hand on my wrist. You came through clean, no bleeding, no complications. I think we got to it just in time. I blinked slowly, still trying to settle my thoughts into something coherent. What time is it? Just past 4, she answered. You've been drifting in and out since morning. Eloise helped Ellie ease onto a folded blanket nearby and stepped to my side with practiced ease. I called your sister, she said. She didn't know about the surgery. I tensed. She said she's coming, Eloise added. No pressure, just thought you should know. 10 minutes later, there was a knock, familiar, uneven. Marianne entered holding a Tupperware container wrapped in a dish towel. Her coat still bore the shape of the department store hanger it probably came from. She looked more tentative than I'd ever seen her. I bought pecan pie, she said. Mom's recipe, or close to it. Eloise stepped aside without a word, gathering the twins in a stack of crayons, and quietly led them toward the waiting room. I watched her go. There was something grounding about the way she moved, like she'd done this before, not just the child wrangling, but the leaving people space to breathe. Marianne took the visitor chair and placed the dish on the rolling table tray. I didn't know, she repeated. I thought Mom was exaggerating. She said it was just a routine scan. She would, I said, my voice still hoarse. Silence stretched between us. Marianne looked down at her hands. The pie's crust was uneven, pressed by fingers instead of a crimping tool. I should have asked you directly, she finally said, but I didn't want to get involved. You didn't want to be wrong, I corrected. You believe them. She nodded. That was my mistake. I watched her, my sister who once rolled her eyes every time I mentioned how exhausted I was, who repeated my parents' words like scripture. You chose this life. But now her tone held something unfamiliar, not an apology exactly, just the awareness that she'd missed something big and was standing in its aftermath. I didn't know how to ask, she said. I didn't know how to say I needed you, I admitted. We sat in silence for a long moment, broken only by the faint snores of Jonah from the hallway. When I looked out the door, I saw Eloise sitting cross-legged on the floor, Jonah's head on her lap, Ellie pressing stickers to her sleeve. She met my gaze and gave a faint smile, then turned back to the twins without saying a word. She's not family, Marianne said softly. She stayed, I replied. Sometimes that's enough. Marianne studied me and for the first time in years didn't argue. I still weak but clear, replies. They always expected me to say yes, that was their first assumption. And yours too. Marianne quietly asks, how did you find someone like her? I whispered, I didn't. She found me. Eloise told me everything while the snow tapped at the windows, and my children colored between us, humming out-of-tune carols. It was Christmas morning, though it didn't feel like it. There was no tree in our apartment this year, too much to juggle, too little time, but the smell of maple syrup and crayons filled the room like a quiet promise. The twins had opened 2 small gifts each, new mittens and coloring books from the dollar bin, but to them it might as well have been treasure. Eloise sat at the kitchen table with her sleeves pushed up and her hair in a loose braid. Ellie was perched on her lap, Jonah sitting beside her with a fistful of red crayons. They were drawing what he called cinnamon dragons, which looked more like melting candy canes, but I didn't correct him. I sipped lukewarm coffee, trying to find the right moment to ask the question that had been pressing on my chest since the elevator doors closed 2 days ago. Instead, I let the quiet hum settle first. The snow outside dusted the window edges in soft white. The radiator hissed faintly. The fireplace video flickered on the TV, crackling with warmth it didn't really provide. You said someone helped you once, I finally said. Back then. Eloise didn't answer right away. She finished helping Jonah draw a lopsided tree before gently setting her cup down. I was 17, she said. In a group home, too old for new families, too angry for old ones. I stayed quiet, letting her set her own rhythm. There was this nonprofit, she continued. They helped kids aging out of foster care, college applications, interviews, part-time jobs. I showed up once. No one noticed me. I didn't expect them to. Jonah crawled under the table in search of a runaway crayon. Ellie leaned her head against Eloise's shoulder. A few days later, Eloise said, someone from the office told me to check their website, said they'd added a new student profile. I figured it was some honor kid with perfect grades. But it was me. I blinked. They'd built a whole page, she continued. Photo of me reading to a younger girl, a little quote about resilience. I didn't write it, but someone did. Someone saw me. I felt the slow pull of gravity in my chest. I asked who made it, she said. The director told me, a freelance web designer named Caleb, said he'd volunteered that year to build a few student sites. Mine was one of them. The room blurred around the edges. I didn't know it was him until I saw the picture by your bed, she added. He looked older in it, but not enough to forget. I reached for the edge of the table, fingers brushing a sippy cup. He never told me, I said. About you, about any of it. He wouldn't have, she replied. He didn't do it for thanks. He just did it. Jonah popped back up with a victorious grin and a blue crayon. Got it. Eloise ruffled his hair. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full of things understood without being spoken, full of the quiet spaces people make for one another when the loud ones get too hard to hold. I kept the site, she said. Save it to a USB. Used it for my child development program. Got certified. Built a career. built a life. I swallowed the lump forming at the back of my throat. I never got to thank him, she added, but now I get to thank you. I shook my head. You've done more than enough. Before she could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Mr. Grayson stood on the porch, holding a tin wrapped in gold foil. His scarf looked older than the twins, and his breath came out in puffs. Pecan shortbread, he said. My wife's old recipe. She's gone now, but the crust still remembers her hands. I took it carefully, heart swollen with something I couldn't name. That's very kind of you. He cleared his throat. I see a lot from that porch, he said. Folks make up their minds too fast these days. I nodded, not sure what to say. He didn't stay long, just patted Jonah's head on the way out and told Ellie her dragon looked fierce. After he left, I opened my phone. 23 missed calls, most from my father, one from my mother with a voicemail labeled urgent. I hit play. We're hurt, Diana. You embarrassed us, made us look unstable. We've always supported you. This feels cruel. I hit delete. Eloise says, I didn't come to repay Caleb. I came to help you because someone once made space for me to matter. The next morning, a letter arrives in handwriting I haven't seen in years, no envelope, just a folded page, to the daughter I never really saw. They arrived 10 minutes late, underdressed and over-rehearsed, like strangers auditioning to play the part of my parents. Right Corner Cafe had always felt like a place where time moves slower. The bricks underfoot had been smoothed by decades of footsteps, the iron chairs chipped from winters long gone. I chose a table at the patio's edge where the wind only brushed your coat's collar and the heater above hummed just enough to fool your bones into thinking it was spring. I'd come early, ordered jasmine tea, left 2 folded bills beneath the sugar jar. Old habit, Caleb said once. People are more decent when they're treated like they already are. I wasn't sure it always held true, but it felt right today. Frank and Beverly appeared exactly as I expected. Stiff smiles, beige coats too light for December, eyes scanning the cafe as if uncertain this was the right place. They spotted me, approached like guests at a wake. You look well, Beverly said, sitting before I invited her. Frank followed, dusting invisible crumbs from the chair before settling. We've started volunteering, he offered quickly. Community garden down by Westview. Keeps us moving. I nodded. That must be humbling. The silence that followed tasted like dry toast, plain and brittle. Beverly picked at the corner of a napkin. We're not here for help, she said. Not for money. No, Frank echoed. That ship has sailed and sunk. I stirred my tea. Beverly glanced at Frank, then back at me. We wondered if someday, maybe you might let us know your children. The quiet that settled over the table wasn't icy. It was clean, like a room after everything had been taken out. I looked at them, really looked, 2 people who once held me up to the stars in the backyard and later refused to answer the phone when I called from a hospital bed, who told stories about sacrifice and left out the parts that cost me. I'm their mother, I said gently, and I won't let anyone close who doesn't respect that. They didn't argue, didn't offer apologies or bargains, just nodded. And in that stillness, I didn't feel anger, just the soft relief of being done. Frank reached into his coat and pulled out a glasses cloth. Beverly adjusted her sleeves. I stood, placed another dollar beneath the sugar jar, and looked at them one last time. Goodbye, I said. Then I turned toward the street. My boots clicked lightly against the brick. Across the way, Marianne stood near the corner, her scarf trailing in the breeze. Ellie was on her hip, pointing excitedly at a bakery display. Jonah held her other hand, gripping a bag of crackers that crinkled with each step. And there, beside them, steady and solid, was Mr. Grayson, his dog sniffing the edge of the walkway. He caught my eye, raised 2 fingers in a kind of salute, and said simply, Told you she's stronger than she looks. To Marianne, I smiled. There are moments that stay with you, not because they were loud, but because they were quiet when you needed quiet most. That Christmas, kindness came not from those who shared my name, but from a stranger who saw me clearly without needing to look twice. Sometimes the people who appear with the least fanfare end up given the most lasting light. When we choose to see beyond appearances, to meet others where they are instead of where we expect them to be, that's when compassion truly takes root. If this story stirred something in you, perhaps take a moment to notice who around you might be quietly weathering a storm. A warm word or simple gesture could be the shelter they've been hoping for.